Power to the Princess, Little Red Riding Hood. Once upon a time, deep in the heart of the country, there lived 3 generations of women: Granny Fran, Mama Phyllis, and her daughter, Philippa. For years, the family lived in a cozy village beside a great wood. The villagers coexisted peacefully with the animals in the woods: rabbits and deer, foxes and squirrels, a variety of birds, and a pack of stunning gray wolves. As the top predators, the wolves helped keep all the other animals healthy and strong and the forest vibrant and green. Throughout the years, the village grew bigger and bigger, eating into the woods. The balance between people and animals shifted. As the wolves had fewer places to live and fewer things to eat, they started to steal food and farm animals from humans. One day, when Mama Phyllis was a child, she came face to face with a pair of wolves while on an errand. They barred her path and twitched their pointy ears. "My, what big ears you have!" she whispered. The wolves stepped toward her. "My, what big eyes you have!" she said as she leaned back. The wolves bared their teeth and sniffed the air. "My, what big teeth you have!" she gasped. Luckily for her, a hunting party was nearby. They caught a glimpse of her red headband and scooped her up to safety. From that day forth, the family told this tale and cautioned other families in the village against sending children into the woods alone. Granny Fran fashioned a bright red hooded cape for her daughter Felice to wear on outings so adults in the area could watch out for her. When Felice had her daughter Philippa, she was quick to remind her of the wolves. She cautioned her to avoid the woods and to always wear her bright red cape when she was out walking. This is how she got the name Little Red. As years passed, the village grew larger still, and the forest grew smaller and more dangerous. Instead of traveling through the feared woods, the villagers built the new homes around it. Granny Fran, sad to see the woods disappear and the village overtaking them, moved one winter to a more remote cottage. While Granny Fran was busy unpacking in her new home, Mama Felice asked her daughter, "Philippa, dear, can you please bring Granny a few items?" "Of course, Mom," Philippa said, always glad to help. "I'll just finish feeding the birds." Philippa often cared for the wildlife, especially in the colder months. "I put together a basket with a crusty baguette, a bottle of milk, a stick of butter, and a log of cured meats," Mama Felice explained, hanging the basket on Philippa's arm. "If you leave soon, you can get there before dark, as it's a long way around the woods. But if I cut through the woods, it's a quicker trip," suggested Philippa. Mama Felice regarded her daughter sternly. "We never use the path through the woods. You remember what happened to me, right?" I know, Mother. The wolves," Philippa obliged. "Never get close enough to see what pointy ears they have, what big eyes they have, and what sharp teeth they have," she recited. "And the best way to avoid wolves is to go around and stay on the path," Mama Felice added. "Oh, and don't forget the red cape," she called after Philippa as she stepped to the door. Philippa grabbed the heirloom red cape from the coat stand, slung it around her shoulders, and stepped out onto the wintry trail. She looked like a holly berry in the snow. As Philippa walked along, a stiff wind blew the snowflakes in a swirling white screen, making it difficult to see. As she neared the place where the road forked, one way leading around the woods and the other leading straight through it, Philippa could barely figure out which way to go. She sniffed the air and groped in the blinding snow. "I think this is the way," she remarked as she chose the trail that went through the woods. As she walked, pine needles crunched beneath her feet. Animals scurried around, and the wind died down, revealing to Philippa that she was in the woods. "Oh, shoot! Well, at least this will be quicker," she said to herself. But just then, a strange feeling befell Philippa. She lowered the hood on her cape so she could listen more closely to her surroundings, and what she heard gave her pause. Something else was breathing heavily nearby. She heard weighty footfalls, and eerily, she heard small animals scurry away from where she stood. She narrowed her eyes and peered into the woods around her, starting on her left. As Philippa turned her head to the right, she saw a pair of pointy ears in the trees. Philippa's breath caught in her chest. She stepped toward the ears, and 2 glowing eyes revealed themselves between the bare tree branches. She knew from her care of other woodland animals not to stare the animal down and not to run. Instead, very slowly, Philippa reached into her grocery basket and withdrew the bottle of milk. Holding it like a spear, she thrust it at what she now knew to be a wolf. A second wolf emerged beside it, and so again to her basket Philippa went, this time for the cold stick of butter. She threw it at the feet of the snarling wolves, who regarded it curiously. Philippa then took the baguette, raised it above her head like a sword, and took the opportunity to slowly inch back from the wolves. She walked backward all the way to the fork in the trail, holding her breath. Once she was safely out of the wolves' range, Philippa remembered her granny. Quick as she could, she secured her hood, ditched the basket, and ran with the cured meats in one hand and the baguette in the other all the way around the woods to Granny Fran's new home. She arrived panting and sweaty just as the moon was rising, and to her surprise, the door to Granny's new cottage was ajar. "Granny, are you home?" Philippa knocked lightly on the door, and it swung open. Inside, she was greeted with an unfathomable sight. Two wolves, their faces dappled with milk and their paws greasy with butter, slipped and slid on the floor. Philippa's grandmother was perched atop an armoire, brandishing a fireplace iron. Philippa brought the baguette and cured meats up above her head like two swords. The wolves sniffed the air and turned, noses first, to confront her. "Lure them outside!" shouted Granny Fran. "What?" wavered Philippa. "The food, my dear." Her grandmother nodded to the baguette and cured meat. Philippa looked from the wolves to her hands, where she held tightly to her food swords. A flash of recognition crossed her, and she flung the food behind her into the yard. The wolves darted on either side of Philippa to reach the food, and as they did, they kicked the air up around her, sending her cape spinning. In the yard, the wolves pounced like puppies on the bread and the meat, devouring the food eagerly. They paid no attention to Philippa or her grandmother. "The door, dear!" Granny Fran interrupted Philippa's observation of the wolves. Philippa quickly bolted the door and helped her grandmother down from the armoire. "Shall I call for some help, Granny?" "I'd say the wolves who need help are the ones who need help are those wolves. They are very hungry, and they really shouldn't have a taste for human food." "You're right. They are hungry," Philippa murmured, watching the animals again from the window. "What about all the rabbits and deer they usually eat? Have they eaten them all?" "No, no, my child," said Granny Fran. "There haven't been enough deer or rabbits for a long time. Not since the village took over all the land. Those other animals have few places to live, and so the wolves have less to eat." "How awful!" reflected Philippa, sitting next to her grandmother. "What can we do to bring back the rabbits and deer?" "Why don't you write to the Fairyland Environmental Bureau, FEB? They'll appreciate a plucky young voice like yours and help us keep the wolves in the village safe." So, as Granny Fran built a fire, Philippa drafted a letter. She outlined her family's history with the wolves, her own encounter, and the turn of events at her grandmother's house. She fetched Granny Fran's quickest carrier pigeon, Lars, and sent her request into the air. The two eagerly awaited a response, and the next day they got it, in the form of a visit from the FEB Wolf Response Team. Together, Granny Fran and Philippa helped the team examine animal tracks, collect crumbs, and look for signs of the wolves. All the wolves in the forest would be tracked and relocated, the team explained, because they were no longer safe around humans. "It's sad that there won't be wolves in our forests anymore. How can we make this area better so they can come back?" Philippa asked as the team packed up. "What an excellent question," the team leader said. "You can help grow the forest by planting trees. That will bring the animals and plants back to the area, and then we can bring the wolves back safely. We have a junior ranger program, if you're interested." Philippa grinned. "I'd really like that. I'd hate to have to move because there wasn't enough to eat. The animals shouldn't have to move either." The FEB Wolf Response Team departed, but not before giving Philippa a series of books and maps, a special tracker's guide, and a beacon for exploring the woods safely. "If you study hard, you'll be a junior ranger in no time," the team called back as they loped silently on snowshoes into the woods. In the months that followed, Philippa stayed with her Granny Fran and diligently studied her junior ranger materials. She tracked prints, followed her nose, memorized the multitude of ecosystems that coexisted in her area, and educated others in the village about the cause of the wolves. She finished the studies in record time and was sworn in that summer as the youngest junior forest ranger in the FEB. Philippa volunteered each weekend with the FEB and of course had her sights set on the Wolf Response Team. Just a few years later, she led that very team and was once again reunited with the wolves. She worked to relocate wolves who grew too close to humans and even cared for a cub that had been injured. From that day forward, Philippa dedicated her life to forestry conservation with special consideration for wolves. Later, while raising a daughter of her own, Philippa campaigned for the rights of wolves in the wild. And after the wolves returned to her home region, she successfully appealed to make the hunting of wolves in Fairyland legal. Years later, when she herself was called Granny Philippa, She was honored by the Fairyland Environmental Bureau with the title of Faithful Friend of the Forest. However, most people just referred to her as Princess of the Wolves.